Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. This evening I'm going to update the board and the community and our team on where we are with our pension system. As you know, it's been a subject of great debate, great input over the last probably 3 or 4 years of the community. I'll take you back, for those of you that weren't on the board, back in 2013. After being here just, for 4 months, this is an expert from our snippet from our budget, the 2014 budget, which was written in 2013. And it talked about our pension fund and where we were going and the troubles that we were going to encounter. In fact, that year alone, we had to put an additional $500,000 into our pension fund. So we sounded the alarms back in 13 about where this was going. So there's some good news and there's some rough news. The good news is that our 2018 report says that we're at 63%. We were at 64 last year. The market really suffered, as you know, in 2017, or 2018, which reflects these numbers. And the good news is that if you look back at the history of our fund, going back even more than 20 years, this is the highest percent of funding that we've had at 63%. This kind of shows you going back to 1999 when we were at 54, and then it goes to the last, the numbers for the last 5 or 6 years as a percent of funding of where we've been. And again, we went from last year, in 2017, through the good market that we had, we actually increased, and that was the first year that we put in the additional $1.5 million of funding that came from the millage that was approved in 2017. We've always met our obligations. We've always met what we're required to put in to the pension fund. In 2016, we put an additional $1 million in before we even passed the millage. And then in 2017, we saw an increase of our fund of 10%. This year, we struggled and took a step back to 63%. Some numbers, I know they're difficult to read from there, but what this shows you is your required payment. Is there a way to blow that up a little bit, Peter, on there to make it larger?
It's not going to be a good way to
Oh, okay, all right. So what this shows you is our required payment for 2019 versus 2020. So we'll be preparing our 2020 budget in the next 90 days. What this shows is we'll have to make a monthly contribution of $214,000. Now, if we weren't paying the full amount, on here it says we could pay $210,000 if we took the phased in amount, but we're not phasing anything in. We're paying the higher amount. That's what we committed to do when we asked the voters to support this back in 2017. So our annual required contribution is $2.57 million. $2.57 million is what we're required to put in to the pension fund in 2020. Probably the most important page in the entire document is found on page 3 of the MERS report. And this tells you what you need to contribute to the pension fund to reach 100% funding in 10 years. And remember, this is what we based our numbers on last year. And what it shows you is that we need to allocate $327,993 per year or per month to pay this off to get to 100% funding in 10 years. So the interesting part is that if you take that $327,000 mark, almost let's call it 328, and you go out and you times that by 12 months, the monthly payment, our required contribution would be just over 3.9 million. So you take the 2.5 that's required and you add in the additional 1.4 million, the additional above what's required to put in, and we need to put in $3.9 million to reach 100% funding. Our hope is to bump that up even more, depending on how a few things happen in the 2020 budget. Our goal is to bump that up even more to $4.5 million, to put in an additional $500,000. I don't know if we'll get there, but that's our goal. But again, the actuarials are telling us for our pension system that if we want to reach 100% in 10 years, we're going to need to pay $3.9 million. We are paying beyond that. We are paying just over $4 million. How? The 2.575 that's required, and the additional $1.5 million that comes from the millage. So we'll be meeting our obligation for the third year in a row. We're meeting our obligation. What MERS tells us what we need to get to 100% funding. The unfortunate part for MERS is that they continue to use, in my opinion, a rate of return that's way out of line. And that's why a lot of Michigan communities are on the verge of bankruptcy. They may not know it at this time, but that's where they're at because they're not paying enough of attention to this issue. It's the white elephant in the room that no one wants to deal with, and it just continues. And for a lot of communities, it's going to implode on them because they're not only are they in trouble, they're using an anticipated rate of return of 7.75. Now MERS is just dropping that next year or the year after to 7.35, but it's still too high. And so we've adopted as a township 5.75. I'm suggesting we can even lower that even more, anticipate a return of 5 going into next year's budget if things go accordingly. So we went down 1%. We again are meeting our full obligation and beyond of paying 100% in, and we're even thinking about lowering our anticipated rate of return. Very key slide. And I want to spend a moment on this so that everyone in the room understands this. We have a road bond coming up, and a lot of, if you've been, we've had 19 presentations, 2 more scheduled this week of public presentations on the road bond that'll be coming up in August. And one of the main questions that's asked is, okay, we understand you need this to fix the roads, but where will we be in 8 or 10 years when this bond expires? And for those of you, I can see Trustee Jackson shaking her head because she's been at most of these, and she knows that that question's been asked a lot. Here's how, if the whole plan comes together, the vision, interesting, we're going into 2020 and talking about vision. Our required contribution, and it's difficult to see it, but it's the bottom number on the far left hand, the employer contribution. And that is a very interesting number if you read it. It's $590,000. That's what would be required if we were fully funded. So what are we paying in? We're paying over $4 million. But if we were fully funded, we'd be paying $590,000. So our goal to get to 100% funding is going to free up a lot of cash for the township. So in 8 to 10 years, when we get this to, even if we're close to fully funded, the required contribution right now is $2.5 million. We only need to pay $590,000 for fully funded. There's $2 million of excess funds that we're putting in because we're not fully funded. After the millage, if we have this bond for roads, if it's approved, down the road, here's the plan for the township then to continue funding their roads without having and allowing the proposed 10-year levy to go away. And here's the plan to do that. It's to fully fund your pension system, which we're on the road to do. It'll free up $2 million. Let's just talk real quickly about some individual departments. You can see the Public Works Department. Assets, these are all just asset liability pages. You can see the Public Works Pension Fund is 83% funded. It's solid. The Police Patrol, 75% funded. Again, in really good shape. The firefighters, this is where we run into some of our issues with funding. The Firefighters Pension Fund is 48% funded. There's over $15 million in debt for the Firefighters Pension Fund. Administrative professionals on the next page is 80% funded. Again, another pension fund that's in really good shape. The Teamsters at 94%. Public Works 85%. And this is an interesting slide because this is we made modifications and benefits, right? This is 2 years now of report on the Public Works Pension Fund with the new pension system we offer. We lowered our benefits that we're paying almost across the board, and this shows you that it's working. Because remember, the pension fund for the Public Works prior is 83%, the new employees are 85%. So it shows you that the new system is working. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute where it really shows. Here's another trouble area for us, and that's the police command. Remember, the police patrol is 75% funded. The police command is only 53% funded. So where are there $6.5 million in debt? So really where we run into our issues with our whole pension fund is the firefighters being 48% funded, $15 million in debt, and the police command being $6.5 million in debt and only 53% funded. So out of our 7 or 8 funds, we only have 2 that are an issue to us right now. So the benefit modifications that we made 2 years ago, are they working? This is the firefighters' pension fund since we changed the benefits. It's not $15 million in debt. It's not 48% funded. It's overfunded. That's a very telling slide that we're heading in the right direction. We've hired people under our new pension system, and we're currently overfunded in that pension fund at 115%. Overall, our pension fund here, as I near the end, again, these are all pages taken right out of the actuarial report. These are not numbers that anyone compiled within this building. These are people who are educated and trained in performing these duties, which I am not. I only know how to report them. Our accrued liabilities and assets for our township. We are $68 million in liability. We have $43 million in assets. We're 63% funded. We have $25.5 million of pension debt. State average. Now you may say we went down 1%. That's not where we wanted to be. The state average is about 3% across the board for MERS members, average of 3% loss. So we did stay ahead of the curve. As you know, 2018 was a tough year for us with the market. Finally, how do we get there? And this is the benchmark for our growth going to 2026. And this is how we'll be benchmarking ourselves each year. And I know it's difficult to see these numbers. I have handouts for anyone who'd like to take this with them. But we're at 63% this year. It's the highest we've been other than last year for 20 years. And then it shows us going to 68, 73, and on up to reach 100% in 2026. This is the benchmark for the township to reach 100%. And remember, when we do that, we free up $2 million that we're currently spending. That's not taking into account the millage. The millage is on top of that. The millage is the $1.5 million that puts us up to $4 million. The $2.5 is what we're putting in out of our general fund right now. And that would free up a couple $1 million. Summary. We have a long way to go. The second year yielded average results for us, not poor, not great by any stretch of the means, just about an average return. We actually thought our losses would be worse given the market last year. But of course, things are smoothed over a number of years. You don't accept all of your losses and gains in one year. If you take a look at our current market conditions for 2019, it's possible we could hit 70% next year. We could jump from 63 to 70. The police department still has the highest pension benefits. We've not been able to reach any agreements with them through negotiations or arbitration to lower their benefit. And I want to keep in mind, keep this in perspective, the highest pension that MERS offers is a 2.5 multiplier. I understand most state employees retire with a 1.5 multiplier. even though the fire departments had a reduced benefit, they still have a 2.5% with a cost of living adjustment. So they still have an excellent pension. Our police department's at 2.75. It's higher than what even the highest pension that MERS offers. Those are some of the things we need to take a look at as we continue moving forward. I also, when I say that, I also keep in mind how difficult recruitment is these days. And recruiting people, individuals to do those two jobs is difficult as well. And as I mentioned before, the average MERS loss for 2018 was 3%. That concludes kind of a summary of where we're at, and I'd be happy if there's any questions that you have.
Board members, any questions for the manager? I guess not. Thank you.
Thank you.